I'm not going to go out in a failure. I am just absolutely not going to go out in a failure. And I want to prove to everybody, but I really want to prove it to myself that I can do it again. It's a very arrogant thing to want to do, but it was the only thing that got me through.
Today, we've got John Stapleton, the founder of new Covent Garden Soups.
The opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is not trying because you're afraid. It's the fear of failure bit that is say, don't try because you're going to look stupid or you're going to fail. Just by being yourself, you'll have that ripple effect all around you. People will listen to you, people will follow you, and people will be more authentic themselves, and you'll have the synergy that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Welcome to FounderMetrics by Vested, the podcast that delves deep into the anatomy of business triumphs and the strategies behind the commercial success. I'm your host, Ifty Nasir, founder and CEO of Vested, and I'm so excited to take you on a journey into a world of inspiring founders. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this episode of FounderMetrics. Today, we've got John Stapleton, the founder of new Covent Garden Soups, which is just one of the brands and businesses that he's built. We'll go into a lot of detail with John around that journey and the several journeys since. So John, can I just ask you to give a little intro of yourself and a brief potted history?
Emphasize the word brief, Ifty. Otherwise, I'll take the entire slot. But thank you very much for inviting me along. For first thing, I'm delighted to be here. And hopefully I can add some value to your listenership, or hopefully something that I say will be engaging and be of interest. So, I mean, yeah, no, I got to go back a long way here, and I guess some of your listenership will wonder what I'm talking about when I say a time before fresh soup. There was a time before fresh. There was a time before everything, of course, and if you want to go back far enough, but my professional career started off in 1987. Would you believe? Now, I come straight out of university at that time, and I really didn't know anything about anything, frankly. But having said that, ignorance is bliss, especially when you're doing something for the first time. And I think that really is an advantage. Might touch on that later. But very first project was New Covent Garden Soup Company. And that was probably the one that people in the UK will know best, will be able to relate to. All the businesses I've been involved with and set up myself have been brands in the food and drink space, so consumer-facing brands. That's what I kind of started off with, and that's what I grew into, and that's what I know the most about. So in a nutshell, as you've asked before, is basically New Covent Garden Soup Company, which was a baptism of fire, really. We learned a huge amount about the food industry, about business, and about ourselves doing that. And it was a great success. I wouldn't want to put it any other way. Certainly commercially, it was a success. And that's great. It's great to start with a success. The downside is that sometimes you think, okay, well, that's how life is. Our life is full of success, or at least you do things. I'm not saying it was easy, but it was successful. So you do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have success. And that's what worked in New Covent Garden, for sure. So there was certainly cockiness about what I did next, which is I went off to the States to do more or less the same thing. So fresh soup in a carton for the US market. And if anybody knew anything, or anybody knew really anything relevant about fresh soup, at that stage, in 1998, we sold New Covent Garden in 1998, so kind of 10 years in. It would have been me, because I had set up the business with my business partner, Andrew, and we had a tiger by the tail, and we had ridden that wave, and I went to the States, and it didn't work. We can come back and talk about that if we
will, because it's that both the hubris and the arrogance of going in thinking that you've succeeded once and it's just the same formula. But we will pick up on that. So
yeah, no, I think we should, because there was a really interesting learning curve for me. And it's not that we didn't do anything right. We did a lot right. And by the way, success, I think, is a lousy teacher. You don't really learn an awful lot from success. You learn, on the other hand, I believe anyway, a huge amount from failure. But that business did not work. So I spent 5 years in California, had a great time there. But the business really should have worked, yet it didn't work. A lot of expectation there. We'll come back to that. Then my third business was Little Dish. Now, in the meantime, I had moved from California to Munich. I live in Munich. I'm speaking to you from Munich now. My wife is German, and we moved together back to Germany from the States. So whatever I was going to do was going to be based in Germany. But I then did a weird thing, which was set up a third business in London. A number of reasons for that. Mostly, I didn't really know anybody in German. I couldn't really speak German, and frankly, the opportunities in the food and drink space were much more numerous in the UK or Ireland, for that matter, than they were in Germany. So I decided to set up a third business. That was called Little Dish. Now, Little Dish is all about, if you don't have kids, you might not know about Little Dish, Potato Dish is about healthy, convenient, tasty meals for young kids, not for babies, but for preschool age, really up to maybe 6 or 7. And that was, let me show you that. I have a little prof here. I thought you might be interested in it, but that's basically little dish. So it's a kind of a ready meal in a sleeve, good quality ingredients, all the rest of it, specifically designed for the nutritional needs of kids of that age. And that turned out to be a success, right? And so I refer to this, if I may mention to you, in the past, it's my kind of, career for sure, in the first half of my career. But I really refer to it as my shit sandwich, because there really was a lot of shit in between. It was like a lovely, warm focaccia bread on either side. I'm not saying it was a bed of roses, but it was ultimately a success, and things were moving and were trying to keep up with demand, and it was a very positive environment. Whereas the environment in the States for that particular business was a lot of shit. And although as I mentioned, I learned more from that 5 years in the States, I think, really, than I did from either of the two successes either side. So those three businesses, or shit sandwiches, I call it, characterizes the first half of maybe more than half of my career. It was like a good 25 years of growing my own businesses, starting from zero, startups, going through on 2 of them exiting, on 1 not. And then since 2017, when we exited, or I exited Little Dish, I've been doing a lot of other things. I'm much more plural in my approach. And I think the way I'd summarize what I've been doing since then is helping small businesses to grow. And typically they're in the food and drink space, so not exclusively, but that's where I know what I know most about. And I do that in a number of ways. I'll either kind of advise the business, or I'll mentor the entrepreneur. And it's only by doing both of these things I figure out there's a difference between the two. Or I invest in the business. So I could invest directly as an angel investor, or there's a number of other platforms, which I mentioned briefly now, where I've invested also. So there's a project, a business called Mission Ventures, which we set up in London with some colleagues of mine. And that's actually not an investment arm, although it sounds like it should, an investment vehicle. It's more an incubator, accelerator. What we do is we find businesses, early stage food and drink businesses. We pair them up with sources of finance, either corporates or investment houses or grants. And then we help them spend the money wisely to enable them to grow. So it's one like an accelerator program that we do a deep dive and explain what they need to do to get listed, get launched, to accelerate growth, to go maybe overseas, and to exit ultimately. And then there's a VC firm that I set up in Dublin with some colleagues of mine there, called the Reedsdale Food Fund. Now that is a pure investment vehicle. So we invest in, funny enough, early stage food and drink businesses. And I'm chairman of a company called Fisher Farms, which is something I really enjoy doing. And Fisher Farms is a vertical farm business. So it's all about sustainability. It's all about food security. It's all about growing green leafy things indoors in hydroponic environments. And we'll talk a little bit later on about some things I'm going to try to do more of in 2025. But Pat, that's probably enough to get going with it.
It's brilliant, and certainly your expertise and knowledge within the food and beverage space, whether it's UK, Ireland, the US, Europe. It's invaluable. I think the guidance and the insights that you'll be sharing with the people within the portfolios that you're working with and investing in, I think it's going to be great. But let's take you back to the Covent Garden experience. I think from our previous conversation, you were something like 23 or something when you kicked that off. Where did it come from as an idea?
Well, that's really interesting. And it came from a guy called Andrew. I got to credit Andrew with this whole kind of concept. Andrew was a guy that I met, and we set up the business and cracked on from there back in 1987. But he had the brainwave of fresh soup, if you like. And there's a story about that he was a keen sailor. He was down on his bachelor pad in the Isle of Wight one day sailing, and it was a typical British bank holiday August weekend, lashing with rain, freezing cold, and he came in after being out on the sea for most of the day to kind of warm up, and his mother had come to stay unannounced, and she said, okay, go on upstairs, have a bath, and come back down, you'd be ready for some dinner. And of course, typical bachelor pad, he didn't have any food in the fridge or anything, but she found some half rotten vegetables, or whatever, made something out of it, and made a soup out of it. And he was sitting in the bath and had this wonderful kind of aroma wafting up the stairs. And he thought, what on earth is that? That's great. Maybe my mother has got some takeaway. And when he came down, he realized, no, this is what you had in the cupboard. Nothing much. And he goes, well, it smells great. And then he tasted it. He says, it tastes great. And that was the brainwave. He thought, wow, fresh soup. I mean, all you can get right now, liquid soup wise, was in a can. All liquid soup was in a can. And well, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, except that it didn't taste like the ingredients. Like basically, what they did is that they had a product which was 18 months shelf life or more. That's what a can is, and they did that for a reason, to make it safe, to give it the long shelf life. The problem is when you try to give anything, soup in particular, a long shelf life, you've got to cook the living daylights out of it. So you end up with something that doesn't taste very good. So you put a lot of sugar in, so it caramelizes, so it tastes sweet. Like take cream of tomato or any tomato soup in a can. Kids love it because it's sweet, right? And there's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't taste anything like fresh tomato soup, which is more kind of, if you have grilled tomatoes, that kind of a edgy, metallic flavor. It's completely different. We wanted a process which actually delivered, weirdly enough, a product that tasted of the ingredients we put into it, not so much the process used to give it a long shelf life. So that was the ultimate aim. And Andrew came to Reading University. This is the piece where we met. Because he had realized that Reading University was a center of excellence for food, still is. I had gone there for that reason. I was studying a master's in food science and technology, and Andrew asked these guys about fresh soup. But of course, they were like ships in the night. They were talking completely different language. You had scientists and entrepreneurs talking about, and, they didn't really know what to do with them. And that they kind of sort of said, well, if it's such a great idea, somebody would have done it by now, which is like the most non-entrepreneurial thing you can say. And they had this conversation apparently for about an hour, but we're getting nowhere. And then they said to him, but there's this Irish guy here on campus. He might be able to help you. And I'm sure they're just trying to get rid of him and pawn him off to me. But Andrew said, okay, I'm here for the afternoon. Let's talk. And we did. We met up.
So that was a match made by somebody else. Guys didn't even meet authentically.
Oh, no, we absolutely met. Yeah, we met physically in Reading University, in the Students' Union. We went down the pub because it was lunchtime. And we were kicked out at closing time. We spent the entire afternoon and evening arguing about this. What a crazy idea. Who would want to do that? Why? And if you did, how? And it was all, just basically all we ended up with at the end of the day, literally kicked out of closing time, can you imagine, was a whole bunch of question marks. We didn't really have any answers. And there and then we thought, you know what, the only way we're ever going to get to the bottom of even half of these questions and challenges and problems and suppositions is by doing it. So we decided to do it. Now, there's more to it than that. We of course went about figuring out how and what and putting kind of a business plan together and trying to raise money and all the rest of it. But that was the ultimate that's where we met.
Yeah. So before the money, after the student union had closed, how did you get past go? What was it? You probably made some soup at home, I guess. But how did you turn this idea into that tangible thing that you could then go and get interest and funding behind?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because based on that conversation, a lot of good stories, a lot of good ideas, a lot of good business ideas start from the pub. Most of them stay there. That's the problem. So to take it out of the pub and actually turn it into reality, there was a lot more involved, for sure. So the point of Andrew coming to Reading University was a good one, in that how do you physically make fresh soup? Don't forget, it wasn't a thing. It didn't exist. It's not like today where you go, yeah, I know what fresh soup is. People are going, fresh and soup doesn't add up. And we were told, by the way, loads of reasons why it wouldn't work. So we had to kind of contend with all those naysayers. We had to contend with all those problems and challenges. And maybe I'll just tell you a few of those, because that was what we were sitting there thinking, okay, how do we grapple with this, to your question? So we asked a lot of experts who kind of, we thought.
What do you define as experts? Were they people working at Campbell's or at Heinz or Baxter's?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the problems is if you ask people what they think and they're experts, they're experts because they become experts of what they've done in the past. And that's all well and good. But what we're trying to do is do something different and look to the future. So a lot of the reasons why we're where we are today are not relevant where you want to go tomorrow. So it's all to do with, how you've come from here is the conventional wisdom has ruled the day, more or less. You want to do something completely different. The conventional wisdom actually is holding you back. Let me give you a few examples. So yeah, we spoke to experts in Reading University again, and now other food scientists, and they told us, you put soup in a carton and don't heat it to the extent you do a can. In other words, don't heat the living daylights out of it. You will kill somebody. They said you will kill somebody. Now, I was a food scientist. I'm sitting up thinking, well, we don't want to do that. We definitely don't want to do that because that's not a great business proposition. What we do want to make fresh soup, we do think there's a way to do this. And they were saying you put liquid soup in a can and you sterilize it. Yeah, it ruins all the flavor, it ruins all the nutritional composition. You end up with something different. That's the only way you can do it because you got to make it safe. I'm thinking, we want to make it safe because it has 18 months shelf life. You know what? We only want 18 days, if even that. So we want, again, the product to taste of the ingredients, not to taste of the process. So we're pushing back and challenging. But they said you would kill. They were very, very categorical. They said soup is full of lots of dangerous microorganisms that if you don't kill them, they will kill you. And we're going, yeah, well, there's a way to, milk doesn't get pasteurized, doesn't get sterilized, excuse me, let the cat out of the bag there. Milk doesn't get sterilized, some of it does, but fresh milk is only pasteurized. So we thought, why can't we just pasteurize this stuff? Ignorance is bliss a lot of the time, we were thinking, why can't we do that? But then other guys said to us, the carton. I mean, why would you put soup in a carton? Back in those days, milk came in a carton, and even today, you don't get much things in a carton other than milk. And the consumer will be all confused. And by the way, there's something back there already, which is called the soup aisle, where the carton doesn't exist at all. And in fact, soup is in a can. So consumers already have a pretty good idea where they can find soup. Why would you mess with that? Why would you screw up with that? Why would you change that around when basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we're going, yeah, but we want it to be fresh. It needs to be in
So that was going back to this classic approach for a startup. You have to find a problem. So your problem was there's a soup in the can, just tastes crap.
Well, I wouldn't say, well, yeah, no, it does. It tastes crap. It doesn't taste anything like it could do if we went with fresh soup. And there's a huge market of canned soup. So I wouldn't say, loads of people are very happy with the crap nature of the soup in a can. And who am I to say that they shouldn't be? Of course, that's fine. But I'm trying to get you, or we were trying to get to, is fresh soup quality to the consumer. The only way is only two ways you can do that. Make it yourself or go to a restaurant. Not very convenient. So we're trying to say we have a convenient solution, which means you can buy it in the store, but it's going to be fresh. It's just going to be as good as homemade or as good as restaurant quality. That was our tagline back then. It was saying, we're trying to get across. And of course, the whole point of the carton was to convey that it was fresh. So you see the carton, and before you get confused, think, okay, soup was on the outside. Before you get to the message, you say, oh, fresh. It's in the chiller, so all the cues are leading you to a point where it's fresh. And fresh is good, fresh is better than canned, so buy it. Now, it took people a while to figure this out. And the other thing is, by the way, the retailers were adamant you never get chill space. Back then, there was no brand in the chiller. It was all to do an own label and ready meals and stuff like that. And it was expensive because you got to chill it down, you got electricity. So the retailers were holding on to that space so that we were told you never break into that space. So you'll kill somebody, and even if you don't, then the carton won't work because consumers won't get it. And then you still won't get on the shelf because retailers won't give you the space. So, and there was 20 other things that people said wouldn't work. So that was the environment we had, Ifty, where we're kind of, thinking, okay, this is a really uphill battle here. Nobody's listening to us. So how do we get money for this idea? Or how do we get a listing for this idea? When there's so many reasons, if you were to listen to half of them, you'd say, let's not do it. But I think that is the nature of an entrepreneur. If it's having the courage of your convictions. And where does your conviction come from? My view is it comes from really knowing your target audience, really knowing your consumer. So we weren't trying to take all these millions of consumers away from the canning aisle at all, because they were obviously happy spending 32 pence on that particular product. We were asking different people completely to spend £1, which is a lot different from 33 pence on something completely different. So that was a struggle, and that's what we had to convince.
How did you get your first break? I mean, I'm guessing before you went to get the money, you had to have a break. You had somebody.
Yeah. No, that's true. We had this kind of catch-22 situation. There was a company called Apex, who were a venture capital firm. They were very big then. They're absolutely enormous now, international in scope.
On the back of your success, and
nothing like it. No, they've been very. I was going to say lucky, but they've done a very good job of growing internationally in the last 30 years. But way back then, they were still big, and they had no food investments whatsoever. But we knew somebody who worked there, or somebody was a secretary there. So I know we got wrangled away in to talk to somebody. Anyway, long story short, they liked us. They liked Andrew. They liked the concept. They liked the revolutionary nature of what we're trying to do, and they backed us. But they said, go and get a listing. anywhere you like in one of the large retailers, and they would give you the money to build a factory. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic. That's delightful. That's great. However, we need a factory to get the listing. So, right, we're kind of like not only catch-22 here, but we can't get past square one. I said, well, look, we believe you, but it'd just be great to have somebody else believe you, like a retailer. So if you get the listing, we'll give you the money. You can build a factory. You can supply. I go, well, it doesn't really work like that. Well, we didn't know how it worked. This is the great bit about ignorance is bliss. We weren't really sure how it worked, but we were talking to experts who told us, retailers keep their cards very close to their chests, right? So even if they want you, they won't tell you they want you. And also, you never really know. You have to be able to prove your case before you get there. And even with brands, you got to demonstrate all this stuff before you get a listing. So build your factory, get a listing. So we were thinking, anyway, we got a meeting at Waitrose. Again, we knew somebody who kind of just got us a meeting. And it's always difficult to get a meeting with any retailer. These days it's probably even more difficult, but in those days too. But what we did kind of realize was, well, let's just get a meeting with them. And we'll come back again later when we're ready. At least we get on their radar and describe what we do. And the real thing is we bring them some of our soup. Because really, the whole point of getting the soup in the carton and then getting the consumer to buy it just once is that it'll knock their socks off. It's so much better than what they're used to. And so much more convenient than making themselves. If they really like the product, guess what? They'll come back again. That we get the repeat purchase.
This sounds like an episode of The Apprentice. So tell me, what did Waitrose say? How many orders did they put on you in that after that meeting?
If you're trying to be Alan Sugar here, is that?
No, I'm not going to be the narrator.
All right, okay, let's get back to that. But the point I'm making about the consumer was we had to convince the consumer that the product was good. And we knew the product was good, but it's just getting into their mouths. Same is the case of Waitrose. We wanted to bring the sample along so I could taste it. We said, even if we don't get any of it, they kick us out of the office and laugh at us, they'll at least have taste of the product, either there and then, or they'll take it home and have it. And that might change your mind. Yeah, we thought that's what we tried. Anyway, we're not ready. We haven't got a factory. So we went into Waitrose, and it was Andrew and myself, and Waitrose are based in Bracknell, down like west of London. And we had another factory. We had a test centre in Reading, close to where actually it was where I was at university. I had left
your home territory.
That's right. So we cobbled together. It wasn't even a factory. It was just a place where we were doing some testing to get some samples to bring to Waitrose. Like a big kitchen with some equipment in it. And so we wrapped up, thinking how, let's see how this goes. Very innocent, and we didn't really have a deck or a presentation. We just had an idea, the two of us. And they loved the idea. And we thought, well, they're not great at playing poker because we know they love the idea. It's really cool. And they did taste the soup and they were oohing and ahhing it. I said, this is great. And Waitrose those days, and even now, they are the ones who give the new kids on the block the chance. They want a point of difference. They want to compete with the big guys like Tesco's and Sainsbury's, but they excel on size. So they want to be the guy that offers something different. They like exclusivity these days as well. So we knew that that's the best place to go. Get into Waitrose, and they usually give the new guys a chance. So they said to us during the meeting, or towards the end of the meeting, when can you start? So I was thinking, I don't know what we say here. I didn't know much about anything other than I kind of thought that soup was going to be seasonal. So I said, we can start in September. And this was like, I don't know, March or April. And it seemed like a long time enough away but I kind of thought they'd say September like the following year. I thought this was 1988. I wasn't really sure, but I kind of thought before the season starts for real. We don't want to start when the season's coming down. I don't want to start in March or April when we're coming into summer, because that's salad time. Soup time is the winter. And they said, yeah. I said, what do you mean, yeah? I said, yeah, okay, well, listen, I'll tell you what, we give you 30 stores, and I can't remember the detail, but we'll give you a listing in September, and to sort out the details with the supply chain guys. And that's great. We love this idea. And we like exclusivity for 6 months. And we're thinking, fine, we can't even make enough from September, never mind make for anybody else. And we went off down the road with high-fiving each other, thinking, look at that, we've done great. Went into the pub to celebrate, as you do. And we sat there for a minute. You had this kind of elephant in the room, which was, how the hell are we going to supply in September? We haven't got a factory. So we kind of, let's not worry about that. Let's figure it out. But with the first call we made was to APAC, said we have a listing. And they said, really? Yeah, we have a listing. We have a listing. We got Waitrose in the bag. We didn't talk details, timing, or it was so let the money flow. But the money would flow, even the money flowing quickly. You can't build a factory that quickly. And it was new technology. It wasn't like, build one of those. It was build one of these things we think, because we're still working on a technology. Anyway, we managed to find a way to ramp up the factory, which wasn't a factory, in Reading up to 160%. I remember that, of its theoretical capacity, and got enough output from the location to supply Waitrose. Now, if anybody at Waitrose had just bothered to drive whatever it was 20 minutes down the road from Bracknell to Reading, they would have gone to see what we did, and they would have shut us down straight away, because it was nothing like it needed to be. It was like it was hopeless. And I knew this because I was a food scientist. But I mean, what are you going to do? We were building a really good factory in London at the same time, in parallel.
Vested is the leading ShareTech platform. What does that mean? It means we make funding rounds a dream, so you can raise with ease. Our platform helps founders secure investment, scale fast, and succeed. Because companies that raise smart grow strong. So take the stress out of funding rounds and raise with confidence. For more info, search Vested.
Without the second E.
So on the back of the Waitrose listing, what amount of money were Apex willing to put behind you?
About £1.5 million, which in those days was a lot of money.
It's still a lot of money. I mean, it's not insignificant.
We were tasked with building a factory and getting the beginnings of building a brand. So it was all about capital expenditure. It was all about building the factory, really, and a bit left over to build a brand. And actually, there wasn't. We thought, like you said, oh, that's a load of money. We'll have, this would be great, and it wasn't enough. I ran out of money. I had to go back and get more. But the 1.2 or 3 to build a factory, we thought that'd be cool, and 200,000 or 300,000 to build a brand. In hindsight, is nothing. But yet again, you have to make it work, don't you? I mean, at least we had yes and not no from both ways.
Coming to the name, who came up with New Covent Garden? Was it you guys, or was it the branding agency? Was it Apex? Where did that come from?
No, Apex are very hands-off, and we didn't have any money for a branding agency anyway, so that was us, unfortunately. Let me tell you the story there. So yeah, it was New Covent Garden. It was a different sort of car. There's a bit of a light. Yeah, is it? Yeah, and people are familiar with it anyway, but it was a different brand, different design that our logo looked a bit different. This is way back in 88, for Christ's sake. I mean, it was different. But where the name came from, that was my business colleague, Andrew. So we got together, like I say, in Reading, and then we developed the whole kind of concept, and it was Andrew's idea. Very definitely Andrew's idea. And we were very different people. Andrew was an old Etonian, and I'm, a farmer's son from the west of Ireland. Couldn't get more different, but we worked really well together. We really liked working together, and we complemented each other very well. But I didn't know anything about Covent Garden or New Covent Garden. I didn't even know they were different back then. And New Covent Garden is a location in London, right? It's in Battersea, where all of the old
flowers and all the rest of it. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, the old flower market and the old vegetable market from Covent Garden was moved out in 72 or 68 or something. Don't ask me. Out to Battersea. And Andrew said it'd be a great place to build a factory because it'd be right close to the source of vegetables. Most of the soups we were developing were all vegetarian then. There was some chicken as well, but that was a minority. So I go, yeah, well, I mean, fine. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like a good idea. And we continue to focus on raising the money, talking to Apex, talking to Waitrose, doing the stuff in Reading. And then I thought, okay, I better go and look at this place. So I rocked up to, and Battersea is a lot different. The station wasn't working, obviously, but everything else was like a wasteland. Compared to what it is today, and looked under the arches, these train arches which are coming out of Waterloo, and that was where we thought we could build a factory. And it was like hopeless. There was no way you could put anything in there. Never mind a factory. And it was what we call in the industry a high risk factory. It was a chilled shelf life product, lots of risks. You had to have high and low demarcation, and you had to have a whole bunch of stuff which we never had, which you couldn't have in that location. So the name stuff, we had the business by then, but we were never going to be located in New Covent Garden Market. And it's like I was saying to you before, when you're in your own business and you set it up for the first time and you're doing everything yourself, we even answered the phone and you go, hello, New Covent Garden Soup Company. And oh my God, what a mouthful that is. Nobody will ever remember that. And I couldn't be bothered saying it because it's 4 or 5 words. It would much better to be saying like whatever, I don't know, Bachelors or Heinz or whatever. But actually that stood a test of time. In the end, it didn't really matter what it was called because we were the guys who put soup in the carton. We were the soup and carton guys. So this was the brand. This became the iconic brand, not so much the new Covent Garden Soup Company bit. But that's where the name came from.
But going back to, at this stage, you guys had just come out of university and there wasn't a lot of your own money in the game. And so, Apex had put the money in. How did you feel? Because, I mean, there's no real jeopardy for you. It's an idea, something that you were knocking around with. If it survives, doesn't survive. How did that feel to you as a person and as a little team? Was it just a gig? Was it just a little adventure? And if it succeeded, fantastic. If it didn't, c'est la vie.
Yeah, to a certain extent, because you got nothing to compare it against. Okay, I was at university. Andrew was a few years older. He was working as a stockbroker in the city, so he had a bit of experience, but not in food, not in business, really. So the thing about it is we didn't really have anything to compare it against. I couldn't say, well, this is nothing like what I did before, because I didn't do anything before. I came straight out of university. And it's like, I was a scientist. So I wasn't even prepared for entrepreneurship. Two completely different fields of orbit, and we could talk about that in a minute if we have time. But so I didn't really know, and nobody knew. And once we kind of figured things out and made it up, went along the way, they were on to the next challenge and the next obstacle. And as I said earlier, ignorance really is bliss. I liken it to when you're halfway up the mountain before you realize how steep the mountain is. Then you realize, oh my God, this is serious. This is for professionals.
Those little false summits give you all sorts of.
I know. You come over the top and they go, oh my God, we got to just keep going. But if you think that at the very beginning, and the way you think that is, you'll have done it before, you know the experience, or you'll understand all the reasons why it'll fail or it could fail. Then you think, I leave it to a professional or leave it to somebody who should know better. But if you don't know and ignorance is bliss, and you're kind of just going innocently or naively going from one false summit to the other, you get to a point where you think, will this ever end? But then you don't stop and go back down. You just keep going because you've already started. You've done kind of like the difficult bit. So in answer to your question, what was it like for us? It was one big adventure. And we were, look, in hindsight, we were a bunch of happy amateurs. We could have done things an awful lot differently. But that would have been with the benefit of hindsight. And we had no hindsight. We were just going from one thing to the next and trying one thing to the next. The great thing about it, though, is we had a tiger by the tail in terms of demand. Because no guarantee that was going to be the case. We were hoping it would be the case. And it's different if you got demand. You're chasing constantly. It's exhausting, but you're keeping up with demand. The opposite is more than exhausting. It's demoralizing if you're trying to, scrape.
It's something. Flogging it is a change. So you'd got your the factory or the production facility sorted out. You had your listing at Waitrose. So how long did it take for you to realize actually this is the tiger that you've just been talking about? Did other people come to you and ask for once you've finished your 6 months exclusivity, can you bring it to Tesco's? Can you how did you get that feel that it was a business rather than just a little gig?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a tipping point, a realization there. And the 6 months came and went so quickly. We didn't even know it was there because we were just running to stand still. We didn't have capacity in Reading. We were building a factory in Harleston in London. It was a crazy time. Like months were going by like there were days.
Sounds exciting. Sounds really
exciting for sure. But we didn't. It's almost like we didn't have time to enjoy the excitement. It was just like crazy full on. But it was exhilarating, and it was very motivating. I was keeping up with demand. I guess the moment we realized, there were a couple of moments where we thought, there's a huge amount of self-doubt here as well, by the way. All of this doesn't go on and you think you're wonderful.
You sound like you're full of self-confidence.
Well, I mean, success breeds self-confidence for sure. But leading up to the point, will it work? It was like, I don't know. And I guess there were a number of little milestones. One was, and we were scared out of our wits in terms of this when competition started. But competition is a good thing because it proves that you're onto something here. Don't forget, we just basically rattled up to Waitrose and said, do this. And they said, thankfully, yes. And we put it on the shelf and it began to sell. Now, that's not what we call a category at all. A category has to be, it has to be in all retailers and it has to be a few other players. And you have to take it seriously. Nobody was taking it seriously and buying it. Nobody was taking it seriously as a real opportunity until, and we were in Tesco's at this stage, by the way. So we were in Waitrose and in Tesco's. And the point here, by the way, is you have to kind of prove to yourself and to everybody else and to the shareholders and to the retail trade that you are a Waitrose product. It doesn't guarantee you'll be a Tesco's product because they're completely different demographics. You have to kind of go and prove it all over again.
Did you have to go chasing Tesco's, or had they?
Well, the great thing about having a listing is you can point to the listing. You know, the problem with worked out okay in the end, but the problem with Waitrose is we didn't have anything to point to. It was just trust us. We know what we're saying. We know what the consumer wants. They will buy this if we can make it for them. You know, it's like that film, isn't it? With Kevin Costner, they say you build it, they will come. Well, yeah, that's a pretty ballsy thing to say, unless you really know, and whoever knows. You know, we didn't know. We were just we had consumer insight, and we had the courage of our convictions, and we thought it would work. But that's all we had to say to Waitrose. However, going to Tesco's, we had the Waitrose experience. Now, they could easily say, oh, yeah, that's just Waitrose. You know, the Waitrose is a different demographics, and they'd buy anything because they're early adopters. And, you know, they didn't say that, of course, very professional, but you could see where their argument comes from. So we have to use a little bit of all over again, but we could prove to a successful case study, we could point to a successful case study that said all this stuff we thought was going to work does work in a Waitrose environment, and we're convinced it'll work in at least 180, maybe 250 Tesco stores. In the meantime, we think it'll work in Sainsbury's stores too. Well, we went to them next. But so getting the Tesco listing was another kind of proof one on top of the Waitrose listing. Waitrose listing was a confidence thing. It was like, we believe you. But they didn't know either, but it was good. Whereas the Tesco's listing was, we believe you because it works in Waitrose. Well, that's good because now we have customers to point at. And then the third thing that happened was competition came in, which we were a little bit apprehensive about. But competition came in because they believed there was a market. Tesco's launched own label in a plastic pot. Because they didn't do it because they were having a punt on this like we were. They were doing it because they were looking at us, saying, hey, there's lots of people buying this too. They'll buy our own label version of it as well. And a third thing happened, or a fourth thing at this stage happened, and it might have been the third or fourth. I can't remember which way around it was. I think it was the fourth thing happened, that the ambient brands came in, what we call the ambient by the Tesco, Heinz and Campbell's launched a fresh soup in about early 90s. And again, competition. Oh my God, these guys are going to kill us overnight. They've got huge resources. They know what they're doing. Well, they came in, they spent a lot of money coming in. They spent a lot of money building a fresh factory. They spent a lot of money marketing fresh soup. And then they left because they screwed it up. And that's not unusual. A lot of companies who are very established and very well known and have a really good pedigree in ambience and the shelf life and the supply chain that goes on there don't really understand chilled. It's a completely different marketplace. But we had because, and they left, having spent all that money talking about fresh soup, they left. So now we had a kind of a vacuum of people talking about fresh soup and couldn't find it because it didn't exist because they left.
So they had helped you build that, or they had helped to amplify or magnify the market. You were then still in place. But what was your moat? I mean, you talk about something that's reasonably easily replicable in some ways, but there must have been something in there that made it tough for people to follow you. Obviously, with the larger ones trying and then failing and then walking away, going to doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, you can't legislate for that. You don't know that's going to happen. And it's great having the whole market to yourself, but then you have a competition, you get scared. But then competition justifies that all the boats rise with the tide and every wind, and then you have somebody else come in and leaving, and then why? So all these things are happening over the course of 4 or 5 years, early 90s at this stage. And the other thing I'd say is that you got to continue to focus on quality. You got to continue to make sure that you are not only the only fresh soup, then you're not the only anymore. You're the best fresh soup out there. So it's really a question of you've got to maintain that upper echelon. Now with the brand, you really have to do that anyway. You can't have an argument which says that own label or Tesco's or Waitrose or any supermarket brand can be better in quality than this because that doesn't work. It's never worked. The brand has to be better. And you really had to work hard at making the brand better. Now, our product was better. And we were the only one in the carton. So we distinguished ourselves from all the plastic pots. And some guys came in plastic pouches in the early 90s as well. So a lot of things are happening here. So our only moat, as you say, was quality. And we were the best quality in the carton, the only brand for a while until brands came in much later. And rode the crest of that wave, and the market kept growing and growing and growing. I guess some people were eating canned soup, but mostly people were not buying it because of a first course of a meal. That's what people think. Okay, what's soup? Oh, it's first course of dinner at home. Well, it's not really. It ended up being a meal in its own. It ended up being a meal replacement. So what happened was we find people were buying this to take to their office for lunch as a replacement for a sandwich or whatever it was, or they were taking it and having a supper in the evening if they were working late and having it with a baguette in the evening. So fresh soup became not a first course of a meal, which we kind of thought initially. It became a meal in its own right, or a meal replacement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can in hindsight you can see that. But tell me, so from the Union Bar to being on the shelf in Waitrose was what time horizon?
I hope it's on date. It was all in the 80s. So we set so that going down the pub was sometime in 87, and launching was sometime I think in 89, and all this stuff with Waitrose was probably 88. Yeah.
So Waitrose in less than a year. Tesco's a year later.
Oh, I think it was probably 18 months or two before they figured out it was a thing.
And then Sainsbury's and the World.
Yeah, the rest then it was kind of early 90s, and by 93, 94, we had this huge tiger by the tail, and we had problems in the factory that we had to solve. We were inward looking for a year or two trying to get that started, and then by 94, 95, it was volume, it was growth, it was scaling.
And yet you managed to still maintain the quality. I mean, yeah, I guess as you scale, that must be one of the things that's at risk. How did you make sure that you maintained that quality rather than you just tasting it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess the answer to that is the process that we used to make the soup. It was quite a capital intensive process. I mean, I look back and I laugh now when I think it was a cutting edge high tech factory. It wasn't really, but it was the most cutting edge high tech factory that existed at its time. And we the other ones that made fresh soup. So we did. It was capital intensive. We had a computer controlling the recipe. We didn't have people kind of like tasting it and figuring out.
It was automated back then.
Exactly. It was automated back then, and we thought it had to be consistent, because one of the things you have to have is a consistent product. Now, whether it's a consistently good product or a consistently bad product or inconsistently all over the place, it's probably even worse. You have to have a consistently good product to maintain that brand appeal, and so the process that we had allowed us to achieve that. So as long as you source reasonably good ingredients, the process will maintain that high quality. And you don't need a long shelf life, don't forget. We originally launched with 12 days, and we moved ultimately up to 14 days. You don't need, and the lower the shelf life, in essence, the better the quality within reason you can achieve. And so we had that on our side too. And nobody knew what fresh soup was. So the expectation was, what it didn't even compare with, unless you made it yourself. So they always liked it. They thought this tastes great. Because it met their expectations, which were, they were making up the expectations in their own mind. And that's a key point about it. Get it into people's mouths and then buy it again. The repeat purchase was never going to be a problem. Originally, we thought was the initial purchase is the challenge.
Vested is the best rated ShareTech platform. What does that mean? It means that we make share schemes a dream. And over 90% of our customers agree that their scheme has helped them to retain, recruit, and to lead and succeed. Because companies that share stakes share success. So get them invested by giving a slice of the pie. For more info, search Vested.
Without the second need.
So, John, idea back in 87, on the shelf in 88. You exited in 98, so that was just 10 years from being on the shelf. So what was the driver for that exit? Was it the investors at Apex saying, look, John, we want to exit this? Or was it you guys getting tired? What was it that drove you to that exit?
Yeah, well, the thing about it is we were always going to exit. The plan was always to create something, scale something, and sell it. So that was always the plan. We never had the idea that we want a legacy business and hand it over to our kids. Right or wrong, that was what we always wanted. Andrew certainly wanted that, and I didn't know how to want it because it was exciting, and it was. But after I figured it out, I wanted that too, and it made a lot of sense. So we were ready to sell. So we were thinking about selling probably from 95, 96 onwards. I recommend, by the way, thinking about selling before you're ready to sell, because you start fighting for it. I'm not saying we were ready to sell, but it was the right time. And so, does 10 years sound right? Yeah, 8 years could have been just as good. 12 years, I don't know, we could have hung on. I think we were all ready to sell at that stage. But the plan was to sell. So it was a question of when, not if. And I think, looking back in hindsight, people say, well, when is the right time to sell my business? Yeah, the answer always is, oh, bloody shit, it was just back then I should have sold it, That would have been, because now I'm doing something else, or the value isn't there, or it's more difficult to convince people, or I don't know. Things change very quickly. These days, things change very, very quickly indeed. So you can sell too soon, and if you do, you leave money on the table because you haven't proven stuff. You're talking stuff up, and you say, well, I don't really know if that's so. Proving a bit is good. Not doing all of it is better, because you don't screw it up. We often said to, I remember doing sales pitches at the time for the business in 97, and it was like, whoa, we could go to Europe, and it's not that far away. You could definitely sell a product there. So and you could, but there's a whole bunch of risks associated with that.
So we just wanted to say, yeah, we do a little bit. We sell to Deleuze, we sell to Monoprix in France, but only on a test basis. But you guys could come in into a trade sale, or even if they were private equity, and you could do an awful lot better here because you'd have the resources behind it. So we were testing the market without screwing it up, demonstrating there was a need without proving there wasn't a need because we had screwed it up. So timing is really important. And that, people came to us and kicked the tires, love what we did. Also, it was important, by the way, that they weren't going to buy the business and say, you and Andrew have to stay. That wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to say, buy the business, you can take.
So you didn't have an. So you had gone into the sales process with the clear understanding you just wanted out. Had somebody given you, let's say, another 50% or something for an earn out of 1 to 2 years, would you have reconsidered, or were you clear you wanted out?
Now, if the 50% is a big number, I mean, I don't know if that would have turned our heads. Probably 50% of a big number is a big number. But 5%, 10%, you don't really get 50%. You get earnouts, or you don't get all of the number in the first place. You get half of it in an earnout. You know what I mean? But the answer to your question really is that we had built this very strong managing team. And we had strength and depth in all the areas of the business that was necessary to maintain going into the future. So it wasn't reliant on a lot of time when people set up businesses, they do it, they do a really good job, and then they want to set it in 5 years or 6 years. This is really what I'm saying, it's too soon. A part of it is you haven't really demonstrated enough value. Secondly, it's very reliant on you or a handful of you. Or, if you set up I always set the business up, by the way, with a co-founder. Who acted or through design with 3 different co-founders in each of the 3 businesses. But neither of us, certainly in New Covent Garden, wanted to stay in the business beyond that time to sell. So it was important to be able to demonstrate that the business could succeed and carry on. And the succession plan was already there. Yeah.
And did you guys keep your friendship? Or was there a stage that the friendship had almost come to a challenge as well? Because that's often what happens. Certainly 10 years in a journey together can be both exciting, exhilarating, and frustrating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I lost contact with Andrew for a bit because I went off to the States then very soon afterwards. Actually, during 1997, I had 2 hats. I was in the States setting up this and setting New Covent Garden at the same time. And Andrew had moved off of the business anyway, and he had gone back to the Isle of Wight and bought a hotel. But yeah, no, we definitely remained friends, but just lost contact because I wasn't in the country for 5 or 6 years for a while. And then now I'm in Germany. So it wasn't as easy as that. But there was no animosity from the business. And I can definitely see how that could happen, because you go through a lot of stresses and strains, and that's what I mean by we're ready to sell anyway. Maybe there would have been all sorts of problems if we had stayed in for 12, 13 years, and it would have been too much. I honestly don't know. But it's a good point to mention in the context of chemistry when you start off, and how you maintain and how you exit with a co-founder. Yeah.
So great story. I mean, we could spend this whole session just on Covent Garden, but let's move on. So thank you for joining us on this episode of FounderMetrics. Remember, even the biggest of ambitions are completely doable when you know what to manage and track. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and you'll never miss another one. You can visit us on www.vested.com, where you'll find piles of additional resources, articles and exclusive content. You can also join our thriving community of entrepreneurs and founders by following us on the usual socials and YouTube. Until next time, stay inspired, stay driven and keep writing your own success story.